Alright guys, in this video we're going to talk about selecting geometry. Something a little bit more fun maybe. We're getting there. So first thing to talk about are your component modes. We've glazed over this in previous videos. I'm going to just unsubdivide that guy. We'll talk about that later. You've got your component modes up here at the top. So in item mode, which we talked about last video, select your item, and then you can hit 1, 2, 3, so that's vertices, edges, polygons. You can select by material or by item. You can also click these buttons. You can also tap spacebar to toggle through. Okay, handy. All right, so now earlier I was telling you that all three mouse buttons in Modo have selection modes mapped to them. Okay, so by default, super handy. Left mouse is your paint select. Okay, backface cull, paint select. Okay, middle mouse is your main one pretty much because you're selecting all the way through. Lasso. Now if you want to change your lasso style, well, let me show you right mouse real quick. Selects is a backface cull lasso. Okay, so even things at a certain angle it doesn't want to get. Okay, once there's an angle threshold, and it respects that. So if you don't like the lasso, there's you can right click. Oh, and you can also right click if you're just hung up on Maya, with the right click thing for components, you can right click and you can change the vertices, edges there. Okay, but also you can right click, go down to lasso style, and go to your rectangle. And now when you middle mouse or right mouse, you get that. The left mouse will still be paint select. Okay. All of these things I'm going to describe in this video can also be found under your select menu here. Okay, so your component modes, invert, grow, blah blah blah, lasso style. I'm going to go back to the lasso because I do like the lasso a lot. All right, so some of the more basic things. Let's grab a single poly and let's loop it. You hit L. Okay, L key is your loop. You don't do a Maya thing because if you double click in here or shift double click, it's going to select the whole element. Double clicking at all does that. Okay, so L is your loop. Alt L is ring. It's being stubborn right now. More often than not, it's just better to give it a direction and hit L, and then it'll just see it as a loop. So you can just give it 2 polys and give it a direction if you give it 1 poly and it doesn't do what you want. Okay, L is your main one. Okay, so now shift, okay, this is really handy. Select between. If I select that poly and that poly, hit shift G, okay, you get select between. All right, and that goes for edges as well. Select edges, shift G, select between. Now something really cool is if let me see if I can do an example of this. I'm just really quickly gonna give this some subdivisions. Okay, we'll take those away in a bit. If I want to select between here and here, it's going to fill this whole area. So that's pretty cool, right? So I can select between shift G, or I can select between shift G. So very cool things with select between. Now if I let's say I want to invert a selection, right? Let's just get an arbitrary selection. Left open bracket will invert that. Okay, and again, that can be found here. If you forget any of these hotkeys, they're in the PDF notes or they're in this menu. Okay. All right. Super cool. Let's get rid of these edges in a very cool way. So I want to get rid of all these edges. I want to loop them all. You could do this. You could paint select them, hit L, or you could select here, shift G to select between, shift double click off the mesh, and that'll loop everything. So let's grab this, shift G, this, shift G, and now shift double click off the mesh, and it's going to loop all of those. And now I hit backspace. Okay, backspace in Modo deletes and removes vertices. Okay, not control backspace. So shift double click off the mesh. Okay, if it'll collapse things all weird. Like if I let's say I control backspace, see how it deletes and collapses. Okay, so if I just hit backspace, it deletes that edge loop. Now I'm in vertex mode. You can see the vertices are gone. If I bring that edge loop back, go to edge mode, and right click, you can get that edge, double click to select a loop. Also, you can just double click loops. You don't have to like loop it. You can just double click edges. And right click, modeling operations, remove. That's also here under, as you'd expect, under edge. okay, remove, and you can tell it whether or not you want to keep the vertices. So I can say keep vertices, remove, and now when I go to vertex mode, you'll see it's left behind a bunch of strange n-gons and vertices. Modo's okay with n-gons. See my n-gon here? Modo is totally fine with n-gons in most situations, okay? And we'll get into that later. You can like use triple to clean that up, okay? Or just triangulate. We'll talk about that stuff later, okay? So anyways, good stuff to know. Now let's talk about the arrow key a little bit. Let's go up here. Let's go into Polygon Mode, which is the 3 key. Let's select this guy. If I want to grow that selection, that is Shift Up arrow. Okay, that's expand. Contract, Shift Down. Pretty intuitive. Okay. Another useful thing would be if I grab this loop, L to loop, and I Shift Left, it selects the next adjacent loop in that direction. If I grab that loop, Shift Right arrow, it goes in that direction, and it'll keep grabbing adjacent loops. Okay, so that's kind of cool. And if I don't hold Shift and I have a loop, it'll just go in that direction, left and right. Okay, it'll toggle between your loops. Okay, so lots of cool ways to make selections. Let's contract this by 1. This one is so awesome. Okay. Control Shift double click inside a closed loop, flood fills that. All right, and it doesn't matter which way you go. So if I grab this loop and I Control Shift double click on this side, it flood fills it. So you can imagine how handy this is, right? It's just really handy for grabbing like caps and things like that. Okay. So Control Shift double click, flood fills inside a closed loop. Okay. Now lastly, let's talk about converting. When I hold Alt to mouse around in the viewport, you see that it also changes my buttons. That's because this is how you convert. This will be familiar to 3D Studio Max users. You hold Alt and then you click these buttons or hit the 1, 2, 3 key, and you can convert to vertices, edges, back to polygons. Okay. Alt 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now this is handy. So how do I select edge borders? Okay, I have a polygon selection and I hold not Alt but Control, and it changes just the edge button to boundary edge. It's going to select that edge boundary of that polygon selection. So if I loop this guy and then I control, well, let's go that way, and then I control edge boundary, you get your boundary edges. Okay, now this is going to be really handy in a bit when we start talking about creasing edges for the round edge shader. Okay, is converting to boundary edge. Okay, so let's go ahead and wrap this video up, and in the next lesson we'll get into some modeling tools, and we'll start talking about the main modeling tools in Modo.